know Last Action Hero tried to advertise itself in outer space, featured death from an Ingmar Bergman film, and had Columbia destroy its own test screening cards, from a giant inflatable Arnold holding dynamite days after a bombing to William Goldman getting paid $1 million for rewrites? This notorious box office bomb has stranger behind-the-scenes stories than anything in its meta-fictional plot. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Last Action Hero. Fact 1. First space advertisement failed spectacularly. Columbia Pictures made history with Last Action Hero by becoming the first studio to advertise a movie in outer space, spending $500,000 to paint the film's logo on the side of a NASA Conestoga rocket. The rocket was scheduled to launch in May of 1993, just before the film's June 18th release date, as part of the first commercial experiment transporter mission designed to give businesses access to space. The studio painted Arnold Schwarzenegger's image on all 4 booster rockets, while the main fuselage displayed the film's title in massive letters. Columbia even set up a 900 number where people could pay $3.50 to record a message that would be sent into space on the rocket, and they held a national sweepstakes where 2 winners would get to push the actual launch button at NASA's Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia. Columbia chairman Mark Canton proudly announced that Last Action Hero was about stepping into different worlds, making it a perfect theme for a rocket launch. However, technical difficulties kept delaying the launch throughout the spring and summer. The rocket finally launched in August of 1993, nearly 2 months after Last Action Hero had already opened in theaters and bombed spectacularly at the box office. By the time the rocket carrying Arnold's face actually made it into orbit, the film had already earned its reputation as one of the biggest flops in Hollywood history, having grossed only $50 million domestically against an $85 million production budget. The rocket was designed to stay in orbit for 2 years, conducting microgravity experiments, meaning Columbia's expensive advertisement for their failed movie continued circling Earth long after everyone had forgotten about the film itself. Fact 2. Dynamite balloon disaster after bombing Columbia. Pictures created a 75-foot-tall inflatable balloon version of Arnold Schwarzenegger to promote Last Action Hero in Times Square, but the timing turned into a public relations disaster. The giant balloon depicted Arnold's character Jack Slater holding 3 sticks of dynamite in his hand, meant to showcase the film's explosive action. However, the balloon was erected in the heart of New York City just 3 days after the February 26, 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center, which killed 6 people and injured over 1,000. New Yorkers were understandably horrified to see a massive figure holding dynamite towering over Times Square while the city was still reeling from a terrorist attack. Richard Brick, commissioner of the New York City Mayor's Office of Film, Theater, and Broadcasting, along with Gary Martin, president of production at Columbia Pictures, quickly agreed to change the prop. The studio deflated the balloon and replaced the dynamite with a police badge before putting it back up a day later. However, the damage to the film's image had already been done. The balloon had originally been unveiled at the Cannes Film Festival in May, where it floated on a barge off the beach, and Columbia had also erected it in Times Square during the film's 7-day shutdown of 6 blocks for shooting the premiere sequence. After the controversy, the balloon was reportedly exiled to a barge in the ocean where it could not offend anyone. The incident became symbolic of the film's entire troubled marketing campaign, which seemed cursed from the start and demonstrated how tone-deaf Columbia's promotional efforts had become in their desperation to make Last Action Hero the biggest movie of the summer. Fact 3. $1 million script. Dr. Army, Last Action Hero went through one of the most expensive and extensive script rewriting processes in Hollywood history, with Columbia Pictures throwing money at multiple high-profile writers in hopes of fixing the screenplay. After Shane Black and David Arnott completed their rewrite of the original script by Zach Penn and Adam Leff, Arnold Schwarzenegger personally insisted that Columbia hire William Goldman, the legendary screenwriter behind Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid and The Princess Bride, to do additional uncredited work. Goldman commanded a fee of $1 million for his script doctoring services, which was an enormous sum for uncredited rewrites even by Hollywood standards of the early 1990s. According to Shane Black, This kind of spending was essentially an insurance policy for nervous studio executives who could then claim they had done everything possible if the movie failed, saying they had given the script vitamins and fortified it with the best writers money could buy. Goldman's contributions focused primarily on Danny's character, turning the projectionist from an evil villain into a kindly old man and making Danny younger and more innocent. But Columbia did not stop there. They also brought in Carrie Fisher, one of Hollywood's most sought-after script doctors, to add what executives called the woman's touch to the screenplay. Larry Ferguson, fresh off writing The Hunt for Red October, was hired to work on the third act. Even after all these rewrites, the studio tried to bring Shane Black back to punch up the action sequences, but Black refused, frustrated that they wanted him to fix explosions and helicopter scenes after having fired him earlier. The parade of expensive writers resulted in a Frankenstein script with no unified vision, and nobody could definitively say who wrote what in the final film. Fact 4. Original writers parodied their replacement. The creation of Last Action Hero's screenplay contains one of the most ironic twists in Hollywood screenwriting history. Zach Penn and Adam Leff, two fresh film school graduates from Wesleyan University, wrote the original screenplay titled Extremely Violent in March of 1991 as a satirical love letter to 1980s action movies. To get the tone and style exactly right for their parody, Penn and Leff went to the Motion Picture Association of America library and read every single script that Shane Black had ever written, including Lethal Weapon and The Last Boy Scout. They were huge fans of Black's work and considered him the Elmore Leonard of action movies, so they studied his distinctive voice and rhythms to effectively parody the very genre he had helped define. Penn later recalled the surreal moment when Columbia told them that Shane Black himself had been hired to rewrite their screenplay, saying it was this strange occurrence where they were parodying a guy and then he was brought in to rewrite them. The irony extended even further because the original script also used Die Hard and other John McTiernan films as a baseline for the movie's style, and then McTiernan was hired to direct it. Penn and Leff had created a comedic deconstruction of the action genre, and then the titans of that very genre were put in charge of rewriting and directing their satire. The Writers Guild eventually gave Penn and Leff story credit, but not screenplay credit, which is unusual for a film based on an original screenplay. Shane Black later admitted he had fun writing the original script with David Arnold, but then Columbia gave it to what felt like every writer in Hollywood for rewrites, turning it into something he was not particularly proud of. Fact 5. Cheaper than Alan Rickman t-shirt. Charles Dance brought a memorable sense of humor to the set of Last Action Hero by openly joking about how he landed the role of the villain Benedict. Dance revealed in interviews that he had been told directly by the producers that he won the part only after Alan Rickman, who had played the iconic villain Hans Gruber in director John McTiernan's Die Hard, turned down the role because of the salary being offered. The character of Benedict was actually based heavily on Rickman's Hans Gruber, and the young boy Danny even breaks the fourth wall at one point in the script by referring to Benedict as Alan Rickman. Director McTiernan had wanted to reunite with Rickman, but when salary negotiations fell through, Dance stepped into the role. Rather than being offended or embarrassed by being second choice, Dance embraced it with characteristic British humor. He had a custom t-shirt made that read, "I'm cheaper than Alan Rickman," and wore it around the set during filming, making it a running gag with cast and crew. The shirt became an inside joke that perfectly captured the chaotic, self-aware nature of the production. Tim Curry was also reportedly considered for the role before Dance was ultimately cast. Despite being a replacement, Dance delivered a memorable performance as the sophisticated, glass-eyed villain who becomes dangerously genre-savvy when he escapes from the movie world into reality. His willingness to laugh at himself and the circumstances of his casting endeared him to everyone involved in the production, and the T-shirt story has become one of the most beloved behind-the-scenes anecdotes from the film's troubled shoot. Fact 6. Stallone's Terminator Easter egg. Last Action Hero includes one of the most famous movie Easter eggs of the 1990s, featuring Sylvester Stallone in a role that never actually existed. When Danny and Jack Slater enter a Blockbuster video store in the movie world, there is a large cardboard standee showing Sylvester Stallone as the star of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, complete with the iconic motorcycle and leather jacket that Arnold Schwarzenegger wore in the real film. Jack Slater even comments that it was Stallone's best movie, treating it as completely normal. This joke works on multiple levels as a playful reference to the decades-long friendly rivalry between Schwarzenegger and Stallone, who were the two biggest action stars of the 1980s and early 90s and constantly competed for box office dominance. The running gag between the two actors had appeared in other films as well, with Stallone's Demolition Man featuring a joke about Schwarzenegger becoming president, and Schwarzenegger's twins showing him comparing his muscles to a Rambo 3 poster. The Terminator 2 switcheroo in Last Action Hero suggested an alternate universe where casting had gone differently, and over the years, fans have become so fascinated by this fake poster that artists have created full versions of it, and it has been sold as actual merchandise. In 2020, a YouTube channel even used deepfake technology to create scenes from Terminator 2 with Stallone's face digitally replacing Schwarzenegger's, finally giving fans a glimpse of what that universe might have looked like. The video store scene also emphasized how everyone in the movie world looks like beautiful Hollywood extras, further hammering home the satirical point about action movie unreality. Fact 7. Ian McKellen. As Death from Bergman, Ian McKellen delivered one of the strangest and most sophisticated cameos in Last Action Hero by playing Death, the iconic hooded figure from Ingmar Bergman's 1957 art film, The Seventh Seal. In the original Swedish film, Death was played by Bengt Eckerott in the famous scene where he plays chess with Max von Sydow's character. In Last Action Hero, when the magic ticket stub lands in front of a theater showing The Seventh Seal, Death emerges from the screen and follows Jack Slater and Danny through the streets of New York. McKellen recalled in his notes about the film that he enjoyed walking through Times Square in full costume with a bald pate and white face makeup, carrying Death's trademark scythe. The production involved elaborate coordination where artificial rain would fall on busy traffic on the director's call of action. And then, when McTiernan called cut, the rain would stop and all the traffic, including the yellow cabs and limousines, would reverse back to their starting positions. McKellen admitted he had not realized that all the vehicles were part of the film and thought they were just regular New York traffic somehow cooperating. He only had a brief scene with Schwarzenegger, noting that off-camera, the star spoke German with his body double, who achieved such a convincing likeness with a wig and false chin that McKellen was shown a Polaroid of them together and guessed wrong when asked to identify which was the real Arnold. The inclusion of a character from a Swedish art house film in a big-budget action comedy demonstrated the film's ambitious attempt to blend highbrow and lowbrow cinema. Fact 8. Danny DeVito's uncredited cartoon cat. One of the most bizarre elements of Last Action Hero is Whiskers, a fully animated cartoon cat who works as a detective in the Los Angeles Police Department alongside human officers, and he was voiced by Danny DeVito in a completely uncredited performance. Whiskers appears as one of the many absurd elements of the movie world that Jack Slater sees as totally normal, but that Danny points out as proof they are inside a film. The character was clearly inspired by Who Framed Roger Rabbit and the trend of live-action and animation crossovers in the late 1980s and early 90s. Despite being an important supporting character who actually saves Jack and Danny's lives by killing the traitorous John Practice during the climax, DeVito received no credit whatsoever for voicing Whiskers. This is particularly surprising given that DeVito had previously co-starred with Schwarzenegger in the 1988 comedy Twins, where they played unlikely twin brothers and would reunite with him again in 1994's Junior. Original screenwriter Zach Penn later questioned the decision to include an animated cat at all, saying it was one of those choices that made him wonder what the filmmakers were thinking. Even the film's agent Chris Moore admitted that from the outside looking in, the animated cat looked like a decision made by somebody using drugs. The character was created by animator Dale Bear, and original character development drawings have since become collectible items for fans of the cult classic film. Whiskers remains one of the strangest and most divisive creative choices in a movie that was filled with strange and divisive creative choices. Fact 9. Joan Plowright's Secret Hamlet Connection, Last Action Hero, contains a deeply layered inside joke that most audiences completely missed involving the casting of Joan Plowright as Danny's English teacher. In the scene, Plowright's character introduces her class to William Shakespeare's Hamlet, describing him as one of history's first action heroes before showing them a clip from the 1948 film adaptation. She tells the students they might recognize the actor from his role as Zeus in Clash of the Titans or from some Polaroid camera commercials. The actor she is referring to is Laurence Olivier, who starred in and directed that highly acclaimed Hamlet film, which won Best Picture and Best Actor at the Academy Awards. The deeply personal joke is that Joan Plowright was married to Laurence Olivier in real life from 1961 until his death in 1989, making her his widow. So the film features Olivier's actual widow introducing a new generation of students to her late husband's most celebrated work, while gently poking fun at how young people might only know him from his later commercial work rather than his legendary Shakespearean performances. This casting choice adds an extra layer of poignancy to the subsequent scene where Danny daydreams about Arnold Schwarzenegger playing Hamlet instead, with Arnold delivering the famous soliloquy while wielding automatic weapons and saying, "To be or not to be, not to be," before shooting Yorick's skull at his enemies. The juxtaposition of Olivier's dignified classical performance with Schwarzenegger's imagined gun-toting version perfectly encapsulates the film's commentary on how action cinema had evolved, or perhaps devolved, from Shakespearean drama to testosterone-fueled spectacle. Plowright's subtle, knowing performance suggests she understood and appreciated the irony of her casting. Fact 10. Test screening cards destroyed. Last Action Hero experienced one of the most disastrous test screenings in Hollywood history, leading Sony executives to take the extraordinary step of destroying the audience feedback cards. The rough cut of the film was screened for a preview audience on May 1, 1993, less than 2 months before the scheduled June 18th release date. The screening went so badly that the audience reaction was catastrophic. Instead of taking the criticism constructively, Sony made the controversial decision to literally destroy the comment cards from that screening, perhaps hoping to prevent negative word of mouth from spreading through the industry. However, their attempt to bury the bad news failed spectacularly. When the film was finally released to general audiences, it received a C+ grade from CinemaScore, which measures audience reactions on opening night. A C+ is considered a terrible score that indicates audiences felt disappointed and would not recommend the movie to others. After the film's commercial failure, an anonymous source close to the production made a revealing comment to the press, saying that they should not have had critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert telling them the movie was 10 minutes too long, implying that the filmmakers knew there were serious problems but ran out of time to fix them. The May screening revealed fundamental issues with the film's tone, pacing, and structure, but the accelerated post-production schedule meant there was almost no opportunity to address these problems. Another test screening took place at the Lakewood Center Multiplex in Long Beach shortly afterward, with similarly poor results. Columbia insisted that reshoots scheduled for that week were not a result of the bad audience feedback, but industry insiders knew the truth. Fact 11. Filming until release week. Last Action Hero holds the dubious distinction of having one of the shortest post-production periods in major Hollywood blockbuster history, with filming continuing until just 1 week before the movie debuted in theaters. Production was scheduled to wrap on March 19, 1993, giving the team 3 months before the June 18th release date. However, the shooting schedule became so demanding and chaotic that filming extended well beyond the planned end date. Director John McTiernan later described the situation as kamikaze and stupid, saying the film was whipped out unedited and practically assembled right out of the camera before being rushed into theaters only 5 or 6 weeks after he finished shooting. Visual effects, Supervisor Robert Greenberg warned Variety months before release that he did not think a production of this scope had ever been pulled together on such a short schedule. The film faced what industry publications described as one of the most ambitious and intensive post-production schedules in Hollywood history, trying to complete editing, visual effects, sound mixing, and music scoring in a matter of weeks rather than months. 2 weeks before the scheduled release date, Variety reported that additional reshoots had been scheduled, further compressing the already impossible timeline. McTiernan openly stated in later interviews that there was no good reason for the rushed schedule, and that it was a depth of bad judgment that required a snorkel to fully comprehend. The studio's insistence on hitting the June 18th date, regardless of whether the film was actually ready, stemmed from their desperation to compete in the lucrative summer movie season and their fear that delaying would create negative publicity and cost millions in lost revenue for every missed weekend. Fact 12. Arnold begged to avoid Jurassic Park. Arnold Schwarzenegger tried desperately to convince Columbia Pictures to change Last Action Hero's release date after he attended an early screening of Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park and realized his film could not possibly compete. Schwarzenegger, who was also serving as executive producer on The Last Action Hero, sat through Jurassic Park and immediately understood that it was going to be a phenomenon that would dominate the box office. He begged his co-producers to postpone Last Action Hero's June 18, 1993 release by at least 4 weeks, but the studio turned a deaf ear to his pleas. Columbia's executives argued that the film would lose millions of dollars in revenue for every weekend of the summer it missed, and they feared that delaying the release would create negative publicity that would hurt the film even more. They also worried that audiences would interpret a delay as a sign that the movie was in trouble. Universal had strategically moved Jurassic Park to June 11th, after Sony had already committed to the June 18th date for Last Action Hero, meaning Spielberg's dinosaur epic would have a full week head start to build momentum. Schwarzenegger's instincts proved absolutely correct. Jurassic Park opened to massive box office numbers and went on to break records as one of the highest-grossing films of all time, earning over $500 million domestically. Last Action Hero opened at number 2 behind Jurassic Park's second weekend, earning only $15 million in its opening weekend and ultimately grossing just $50 million domestically. Schwarzenegger later blamed the timing as a major factor in the film's failure, noting in interviews that it was obvious poor timing to open against such a juggernaut. Fact 13. $36 million theme park ride. Columbia Pictures went absolutely overboard with merchandise and promotional tie-ins for Last Action Hero, spending staggering amounts of money on deals that ultimately became embarrassments when the film flopped. The studio secured a $20 million promotional partnership with Burger King, which created special animated action cups and other tie-in products featuring scenes from the movie. But the most extravagant expense was a $36 million ride film attraction designed for installation in amusement parks across the country. These ride films were a popular format in the early 1990s, where audiences would sit in motion simulator seats that moved in sync with action footage shown on large screens, creating an immersive experience. The massive investment in the ride attraction demonstrated just how confident Columbia was that Last Action Hero would become a major franchise. The studio also licensed 7 different video games across multiple platforms, created action figure toys, and developed numerous other merchandise deals. Interestingly, Schwarzenegger personally insisted that all the toys and video games be produced without guns, hoping to appeal to a broader family audience despite the film's PG-13 rating. This decision backfired because the next aisle in toy stores featured Jurassic Park dinosaur toys tearing each other's heads off, which proved far more appealing to kids. The film's total marketing budget reportedly reached into the tens of millions, not including the production. Cost of $85 million. When the film grossed only $137 million worldwide, the combination of production costs, marketing expenses, and the money spent on tie-ins meant Columbia faced losses of well over $100 million, according to some estimates. Fact 14. James Cameron. Heard Arnold crying, the box office failure of Last Action Hero devastated Arnold Schwarzenegger so completely that director James Cameron said it was the only time he ever heard the action star truly down. Schwarzenegger revealed in Netflix's 2023 docuseries Arnold that he could not tell people how upset he was about the film's reception, saying it hurt his feelings and was deeply embarrassing. The failure was particularly crushing because it came at what Schwarzenegger considered the peak of his career, following Terminator 2: Judgment Day, which had been the most successful movie worldwide in 1991. Schwarzenegger admitted that after Last Action Hero opened to terrible reviews and weak box office, he did not want to see anyone for a week and essentially isolated himself. James Cameron recalled calling Schwarzenegger the weekend after the film opened and being shocked by what he heard. Cameron said Schwarzenegger sounded like he was in bed crying and took the failure as a deep blow to his personal brand, describing it as something that really shook him. This was extraordinary because Schwarzenegger had built his entire career on an image of invincibility and confidence, never showing weakness or vulnerability. Cameron asked Schwarzenegger what he planned to do, and Arnold simply said he was going to hang out by himself for a while. Eventually, Schwarzenegger found perspective through his family, particularly his mother-in-law, who told him to just move forward. In later interviews, Schwarzenegger reflected that life is a play, and you have to be able to take failures with successes. But at the time, the pain was very real and very personal. Fact 15. Art Carney and Tina Turner's final film. Last Action Hero holds the bittersweet distinction of being the final feature film appearance for two legendary entertainers from very different worlds of show business. Art Carney, who played Nick the kindly projectionist who gives Danny the magic movie ticket, was making his last appearance on the big screen. Carney had begun his career in radio in the late 1930s before becoming a household name as Ed Norton on the classic television series The Honeymooners in the 1950s. He won an Academy Award for Best Actor in 1974 for his performance in Harry and Tonto, proving he was far more than just a television comedian. In Last Action Hero, he plays Jack Slater's favorite second cousin Frank, whose death Jack is avenging because he had already avenged all his closer relatives in previous films, which serves as one of the movie's many jokes about action movie logic. Carney passed away in November of 2003 at the age of 85. Tina Turner appears in a brief but memorable cameo at the climax of the fictional Jack Slater 3, playing the mayor of Los Angeles who tries to convince Slater not to enter a dangerous hostage situation. Turner, the legendary rock and roll singer known as the Queen of Rock, had appeared in a handful of films, including Tommy and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, but Last Action Hero marked her final time acting in a theatrical feature film. Turner retired from performing in 2009 and passed away in May of 2023 at the age of 83. Neither actor could have known at the time that this troubled, ambitious, meta-fictional action comedy would be their final bow in cinema.